Welcome to the Glenn Beck program. I'm Judge Andrew Napolitano filling in for Glenn, who's attending to a minor medical emergency with his daughter. He wanted me to tell all of you thank you for your prayers, and he'll be back tomorrow, and I've got him on Freedom Watch this weekend. As you know, Glenn has a ton to say about the president, about the oil spill, and how the media has turned on the president. He'll even make an appearance later on in this show, but for now you've got me and the immortal words of Thomas Jefferson. When the people fear the government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty. Let's go. Hello, America. Last night in an Oval Office speech to the nation, President Obama took the gloves off. He lashed out at BP over the monumental oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. He vowed that he would make BP pay for all the long and short-term damage it caused, and he argued that the battle against this now nearly 2-month-old raging gusher of oil is tantamount to a war. And he asked the country to allow him and the Congress to regulate all businesses and private homes in the name of going green. For most Americans, it was the first time they saw him angry, although a controlled anger from the no-drama Obama, as his campaign staff labeled him 2 years ago. But will the president's feigned anger get the oil well plugged? Will it get cash into the hands of those truly harmed? Will it prevent future disasters? No, no, and no. Here are the facts. After the Exxon Valdez disaster off Alaska in 1989 had been cleaned up and nearly paid for by Exxon, the oil companies lobbied the Congress for liability limits. That would be maximum amounts that they could be held to pay for in the event of a disaster. A Republican Congress and President Bill Clinton together made it the law that oil companies would be limited to pay $75 million for the cleanups. And the taxpayers, that would be you and me, would pay for the rest. In return, the feds would be able to tell the oil companies where to drill. In this case of BP, it asked the state of Louisiana if it could drill in 500 feet of water, and Louisiana said it could. The federal government vetoed that and told BP it could only drill in 5,000 feet of water. Never mind that no oil company had ever cleaned up a broken well at that depth. And never mind that the feds had never monitored a broken well at that depth. And never mind that BP only needed to set aside $75 million in case something went wrong. The feds trumped BP engineers, and the feds trumped the wishes of the folks who live along the Gulf Coast, and the feds decided where this oil well would be drilled. Disaster struck. The feds did nothing. Oil gushed out in an amount so great as to be immeasurable. Political pressure grew. The president eventually panicked because he believes that his federal government can right every wrong, regulate every activity, and protect us from every catastrophe. He's wrong. Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal was ready to build barriers to protect his state's coastline, and the feds incredibly said no. The president even invoked powers that allow him to supervise the cleanup using BP personnel and equipment, and the oil still gushes. Last week, the president stopped all drilling in the Gulf, putting thousands of Americans out of work. Last night, he demanded billions from BP so his team could decide who gets it. And today, a terrified BP gave him all the cash he asked for. So the government that foolishly limited BP's maximum liability, the government that claimed it knew where best to drill, the government that actually stopped locals from protecting their own shoreline, that would be the same government that has bankrupted Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the Post Office, Amtrak, and virtually everything it has ever managed. The government now wants to decide who gets BP's cash. The last time this government had this much private cash to give away during the GM and Chrysler bankruptcies, it disregarded well-settled law and it gave it to its friends in the labor unions. To whom will it give this cash? The innocent injured or its political buddies? The government cannot protect us from every catastrophe, especially ones its rules have facilitated. How about this? That government is best which governs least. The people have a right to a government that obeys the laws of economics and the laws of physics and the Constitution. Let private enterprise do what it does best and keep politics out of the way. If the Constitution was written to keep the government off the people's backs, it's time for the feds to get off. The president met with executives from BP 58 days after the accident that led to this disaster. BP and the White House reached a preliminary agreement today to put about, are you ready for this, $50 billion into an escrow account to cover damage claims from the spill. $20 billion. Now let's bring in today's Business Roundtable. Here's Charlie Gasparino. He's a Fox Business Network senior correspondent. He's also the author of The Sellout. And John Tamny is here. He's the editor of RealClearMarkets.com. And Stuart Varney is here. He's the host of Fox Business Network's Varney and Company. Stuart, first to you. Should the government have BP's cash and decide to dole it out without having to see evidence of who was harmed and on some political model?
Flat out, no. BP was prepared to meet all genuine claims, all viable claims. It said frequently it would pay legitimate claims. Not good enough for the government. They have successfully demonized and now looted BP. What they're doing is they've got this $20 billion pot of gold. They will now send it out to, as you said, Judge, their political buddies and anybody who has any claim against BP. They're going to get paid off with BP's money.
Even though the law of the land is, written by the Republican Congress and signed by the Democratic president back in the 90s, that there's a $75 million liability limit, which by today's standards seems absurd. BP did agree, as Stuart indicated, it would be responsible for this. The landowners are innocent victims of this. But why should they give their cash to a politician in the White House? This is not a federal judge. This is a politician who will decide how the money is spent.
I want to first say that the special administrator of this fund, Ken Feinberg, I believe is a decent guy. I don't believe he's a political hack. I know him. I think he's pretty good. Say what you want about the system. I will also say that $20 billion sounds pretty light to me. Oh, yes. I mean, it sounds like they cut a really good deal, because the bottom line is, if you really want to pay back everybody, I mean, this is massive damage. I mean, by the way, the oil's still gushing out of there. They don't know when this is going to end. I heard the president said they're going to have a couple of weeks, 90% of this thing should be stopped. I hear that this that this field can go as far as Nicaragua. This bill should be much more than $20 billion. And then, you know what? Then BP did a smart move.
If BP may have done a smart thing, John, if it limited its liability, but it didn't limit its liability. This is just an initial down payment, not going to be dispersed by a jury, not dispersed by a judge, not by anybody who will require evidence of harm, but on the basis of who the applicant is and what they say they need.
Yeah, I mean, whether it's $20 billion is light or excessive, I think, is irrelevant at this point. The dangerous thing here is that BP had a deal. The law was on the books, and the federal government is basically saying, we are going to change the rules in the middle of the game, and we will try, if we want, to put you out of business. This puts a bullseye on American companies around the world.
Didn't the president's demonizing of BP result in a drastic loss of shareholder value, and innocence suffered as a result of that demonizing?
Yes, it was done. It was deliberately done. It was the demonization of BP for populist political reasons. It diverted attention. It converted the people's anger at BP, and there's a lot out there, converted that anger and diverted it away from the other anger in the picture, which is that the president and the administration had delayed in stopping that oil reaching the shore and delayed treating the cleanup.
BP, I've done a lot of reporting on this. They brought in Goldman Sachs, Blackstone Group, Credit Suisse, because they are worried about the future potential bankruptcies. Clearly, they'll say no, but it's clearly on the table in terms of protection. But I will say this, that if you look at the way the stock's trading now it's off its highs, it's about half. It's not trading as if it's going to bankruptcy. The market is saying that just from listen, I'm not talking about from a constitutional standpoint, I'm talking about from a financial standpoint. The market is saying that this $20 billion is a gift. That
so
this deal is a gift.
All the British pensioners and all the American pensioners and all the labor unions that own BP stock can expect what for the quarterly dividend? Zero, according to what the president talked them into doing today.
From what Obama wants, and let's recognize that the cost of insuring BP debt has gone up, I think, 10 or 15-fold at this point. Markets think it's a possibility that the Obama administration will put BP out of business, and this puts every U.S. firm that's multinational, puts a bullseye on them. If they can do it here, the next time we make a mistake overseas, they might come after U.S.
Was David Cameron, was the Prime Minister of Great Britain correct to take the president to task so publicly for his demonization of this company?
The Prime Minister asked that it be not an unlimited liability situation. He was not granted his wish. This is unlimited liability on the part of BP. Maybe so, but it's not limited to $20 billion.
Well, we know that.
It's
But
not.
look, if I pour oil into a stream on my property,
Right.
I am responsible for the damage caused wherever the stream takes that oil. If you replace me with big oil, if you replace the stream with the ocean, there's some limit to the liability. Why should there be any limit to what BP has to pay?